Well, I was amazed. I was invited back to ABHE and not actually met at the gate by the FBI trying to send me back to Washington, D.C., or that perhaps I was be given a hotel room with a Russian window with a view, if you know what I'm saying. Our conversation this afternoon is about why disciple making in higher Christian education needs a turnaround. So to take that from a dorky sentence to a straightforward one, why disciple making in Christian education needs a turnaround. And I'm hoping this will be a provocative and stimulating thought for everybody after their lunch break. I hope to keep you awake. So to start with, I want to begin with a simple, audacious thesis for you in higher Christian education. This is an either or proposition, which is to say that either it's DWMD, WMD, that stands for disciples who make disciples who make disciples. You'll see this throughout our talk today. It's either that or it's doom. Now, I mean this word doom in the nicest possible way. It's actually a book by Professor Neil Ferguson. He's a financial historian, also the biographer of Henry Kissinger. And in this book, he wrote it at a period of time when he was an atheist. He today says that he is now a lapsed atheist. He is now a believer, follower of Christ, based on what he understands about the Christian worldview. He left atheism. But when he wrote this book, he was not talking about the end of the universe or the end of the earth. What he was talking about is this propensity for people to forecast doom. His book is actually anti-doom. In a way, it's a bit of tongue-in-cheek, but showing how many not good outcomes do in fact matter to you. You have to manage things. History doesn't always repeat, but the trends tell you where the path leads, and it's usually to not good. Not really doom, but we'll use doom today as kind of our marker. Now, if you're tracking with me so far, you're going, wait a minute, maybe. Look, are you trying to sell us the job of discipleship in higher Christian education? Are you trying to pawn that off on us? That's not our job. That's what the churches do. And by the way, doom, unless we do something, this what, then what exactly are you saying? And who the heck are you anyway? Those are kind of the questions that maybe lurk around your mind. Let me start with the last one. I'm a dark-hearted corporate turnaround guy. Um, I work as a chief executive officer serving Wall Street acquisition banks like Kohlberg. You see at the top, KCAP is Kohlberg Financial. You might know them from the book Barbarians at the Gate. Comvest, just below them, the CEO of Comvest Partners on Wall Street was, in fact, the character sketch for what would become the movie The Wolf of Wall Street. 6 times I've been a turnaround CEO for companies owned by these investment bankers and their struggles. Some of the companies keenly aware they were in trouble. Some were quite oblivious to their doom. Turnarounds have, though, a curiously recurring set of symptoms, and they also have an interestingly common root cause. We're going to talk about both of those. My task was to go into these businesses and help in their vitality and purpose to get healthy and get going again. So you might ask, well, why is an unwashed pagan like you been granted audience with all the saints of ABHE? And the answer is, I want to talk to you about, well, Darth Vader would say it this way: it's your destiny. Let's set up the problem, see what's here. I want to talk about this one missing thing. For years working in turnarounds, different companies, different circumstances, I kept noticing that each struggling company had the same root cause, same missing thing. Secondly, as my wife Karen and I moved from different cities, as we went from one company to another company to help them out, as we were living in communities of churches with Christians, talking in some cases to seminaries and Christian colleges, we kept noticing this same missing thing was hobbling Christianity. Now, this missing thing is important because we're going to talk about the existential fight that you're in higher Christian education, and it requires a unique and different approach over the usual stuff to win. So what you decide about what we're going to talk about today actually has impact far beyond your own campus. You cast a long, influential shadow over the world in higher Christian education. Not only do you influence the churches as your students emerge from your care and your development into the churches as members and leaders, but you also affect families and communities, neighbors and friends with the people who come out of your institutions. And of course, society as well is influenced deeply by these people, or are they? That's a question that we want to raise today. Again, going back to your concerns, some of you are saying, wait a minute, this is not my job. Discipleship's not my job. That's the church's job, not my job. I want to challenge that notion with you. So stick with me as we go into this one missing thing conversation. Does higher Christian education need to do something different? Do they need a turnaround? The gist that may be underlying your thinking is this: absent this missing thing you're talking about, are you trying to suggest doom? I'd like to put some data, some puzzle pieces on the table for you to ponder. This is a grid that we often use in mergers and acquisitions. It's 4 quadrants: thriving, hoping, inertia, struggling, describing businesses and their business attributes that tell us that things are going well or not well. 3 of the quadrants are about organizations that are in some form of distress: inertia, struggling, hoping. 1 quadrant: thriving, companies that are doing pretty well, upper right-hand corner. What is the horizontal green dash bar in the middle talking about? Well, that's describing, we're gonna see a plot that describes increasing head counts year on year or decreasing head counts. If you're above the line, you're growing. If you're below the line, you're shrinking in head count. What's the vertical green dash line? That's investment flow. That's basically capital flow, endowment flows, income flow. Are you living within your means or not? Are you building your balance sheet up in a healthy way or not? If you're on the left side, it's the or not. If you're on the right side, things are going well for you on the financial side. So a thriving organization, strong financially, strong in terms of headcount growth. An inertia organization, not doing so well with the balance sheet and the income statement, but the headcount's up, so carrying along with inertia. The hoping category, we're not growing in headcount, so we're throwing some things at it, hoping that with this investment, we'll be able to regain our momentum and our strength. And struggling, of course, is negative in both axes, headcount and investment. This is an 8-year study, 2015 to 2023, looking at 234 schools. We had a 350 school database to work with, but some of the schools left during the period of the study. Some of the schools entered during the period of the study. We had to net those out and work with schools that stayed aboard the entire 8 years. All the schools started their 2015 year basis right at the center point of this, the crosshair, as it were. Everybody started there, and we're going to go each year and we're going to see what the change in investment and the change in headcount look like. That becomes a 1-year average. Then we're going to take the next year, make a delta out of that. We're going to average all 8 years together and place the plot on the average of headcount and investment flow with the XY grid you see here. What does that look like with 234 schools? Well, it looks like this. There's your plot base. The upper right quadrant, thriving, is 27% of the dots. They're in pretty good shape. While the rest of the group, the 73%, are in the distress categories of inertia, struggling, or hoping. If you average this out simply by dot placement, not by the actual dollars and the actual numbers of heads, but you just give yourself a sort of a on this, higher Christian schools end up here, down in head count. That would not surprise some of you because of the demographic cliff we'll talk more about. Also, financials is slightly to the right of the center line, but not much. It's kind of a wash, really, not doing well. And I would suspect, looking at businesses, as this headcount decline continues, which in the business world, you might think of customers or revenues decline, you're going to see your financial situation becoming more distressed. Interestingly, the Wall Street Journal conducted a study, same time period, same criteria for public and secular schools, and their plot was here. Most secular and state schools ended up in the thriving categories, just as a little transitional idea here of what's going on. So go back to our original point, 6% of the schools up in the inertia category, 27% of the schools in thriving, but 67% are down here and struggling and hoping. If you think about it from a merger acquisition viewpoint, 73% of the 234 schools plot out in the distressed area. Okay, let's get off your campus and let's go tour North America just a little bit. Let's take a look at society. This is a religiosity curve by Professor J. Tobin Grant. It was in a peer-reviewed journal, Sociological Forum. Interestingly, as I researched a few of these religiosity curves, they were from different institutions, different data sets, but the plots were amazingly similar in their fit. Religiosity is declining down from 1952 through 2012, when this particular study was conducted. Religiosity, in a word, is just basically the inclination of people to go to church or to be religious. General comment. J. Tobin Grant studied this from 52 to 2012. I want to especially concentrate on late 1990s through 2012. Tremendous downdraft in religiosity in America. He had some factors that came up: terrorism, church scandals, and Generation Z. He wasn't saying they were driving the curve down, but they were at least attributes and headlines at the time this was all going on. Society's becoming less religious. We are operating well below the waterline of history's normative over a number of decades. It suggests people are bailing on religion. So let's drill down a bit into Christianity proper and get away from just the generic category of religion. The black and the gray lines at the bottom of this graph are people who go to church monthly or yearly between 1972 and 2010. So we've got a 38-year study going on here by the General Social Survey. Not much change in the monthlies and the yearlies, but watch the swap with the red and the blue lines. We have the weekly attenders going down, the rarely nevers going up. The net flow there was 5 million people from weekly to just once in a while, if at all. That's 5 million people. Keep that number 5 million in hand. Let's look at a Pew study, which takes 2007 to 2019 into account. Protestants and Catholics are drifting downward, while nothings, agnostics and atheists, are drifting upward. That net shift resulted in down 33 million for Christians that time period, while the nots, the nuns and the duns, as we'll talk about in a minute, are up 30 million. If you team that up with the General Social Survey study, that suggests that 1972 to 2019 is down 40 million. That also happens to sync up with Ryan Burge, Michael Graham, and Jim Davis's book, The Great Dechurching. They also assert we're down 40 million Christians. All of this washes morbidity out of the numbers, by the way. It's not just people died. They're still alive in these surveys tracking through these numbers. Quite a change, actually, right? So the classic business strategy for most companies that are in trouble and with stuff like this facing them is keep calm and tradition on. Just keep your head down. Keep on keeping on. Don't do things differently. Let's get a little more granular and look at it again back in your industry, your business, your world. Closures in schools. Operating secular schools in 2013, according to the Acton Institute study, 3,300. Operating Christian colleges and universities, same year, 570. All right, let's talk closures. 2013 to 2022, 9-year period. Secular institutions closed 47 of those 3,300. That's 1.4%. Christian schools closed 49, 8.6%. In math, that means that Christian schools are closing 6 times as fast as secular schools. We can even bump that into a snapshot of 2023. 75% of the 28 closures were Christian. That means 20 times the rate. You got some strategic threats on the chessboard that we need to talk about in higher Christian education. Let's go over those briefly. We have enrollments. You've already talked about what's going on there. We've talked about liquidity trends. We've had a little bit of conversation about how endowments are starting to pull back. Investors pull back when they're not sure that you've got the jazz, the riz, the thing, the reason. Societal forces are not working in your favor. Secular institutional perks are another threat for you. What are those? Well, here's just a very quick summary of those. Typically, seculars have larger endowment pools. They tend to have easier access to government funding. They tend predominantly to have more science, technology, engineering, and math. And prosperism swirls around the secular schools. You Christians, you're not out there to make a bunch of capitalists rich, but the secular schools, They're making those promises in the marketing. If you want to count, if you want to have a big net worth, if you want to be famous, come see us. Your supply chain's another threat. You're getting some bum raw material and it affects you and it's a threat for you right now. Let's talk about the under-discipled disciples that are coming to your campus door. You have what we consider to be non-conforming material in the supply chain. Supply chains are hot topics. Where do I get my raw material? What's the quality of my raw material? Can I count on getting my raw material? Some of those questions matter for you too, right? Offshoring, friendshoring, we're starting to worry about China, or can we expect to get anything from them? What's the quality that we'll get from them? Similarly, in the Christian arena, we have problems with the people coming to us from churches. Churches are struggling to break through with the societal pressures that you're also facing, and it results in some interesting statistics. These are all stats that I'm taking from studies like Barna, Pew, IPPR, even the Humanist Society of Great Britain is contributing to some of the data we have here. And this is all documented in our book if you want to see the autopsy on it. The nuns and the duns, the millennials and the Gen Zs, basically think 48 and below right now, are walking out of church. They were raised in church, but 60% of the millennials and Gen Zs raised in church are walking off. The number's higher if you happen to be a Gen Z, but it's definitely visible even at the millennial stage. Walking out. If you're still in the pews after they've walked out, there's acedia, 35% acedia. What do I mean by that? Well, it ain't my job to talk about the reason for the hope that's within us. That's your job as the pastor. Maybe your job as the professor. It ain't my job in the pew. We have Jesus among other gods. 40% of the people still in the pews think Jesus is not the only way to access God. Illiteracy. We also call this in the book inerts, which means that 82% of the people in the pews today, no Bible study, no fellowship, no prayer life. They attend church 1.7 times a month, 82%. Unable, unwilling. 80% of the people say, I'm not equipped to talk about this reason for the hope, as opposed to the people over on the left, the acedia, saying, it ain't my job anyway. 80% of the people, I don't know how to do it, so I'm not going to do it. You do it. 92% of the people in the pews are mute about their faith. They have not shared their faith in over a year, if at all. And there's a lot of anxiousness. And of course, your own budgets and events reflect that as you see a lot of students coming to campus with a lot of anxiousness and fret and baggage. Post-COVID, certainly you're seeing that. Stay out of my life. Solo Christianity is 40% of the people in the pews. It's a private matter. You don't need to be in it. Leave me alone. The question that we should ask is, if I'm shipping you these kind of Christians, is something amiss? Do you have a problem with the folks that you're bringing aboard? And what should we do? You have all these strategic threats, the kind of stuff that you really don't have any control over. You can't buy your way out of it, market your way out of it, hope your way out of it. You got to do something different if you want to work with this. So, does all this mean, like, is this doom for higher Christian education? You have to decide with these students coming aboard that you're either going to remediate, try to bring them up to snuff so that you can work with them, um, or how will they hold on, right? And these people will leave your campus and reemerge in churches, communities, workplace, and society. This kind of status quo is no bueno. Maybe we could say it another way. It might be time for us in higher Christian education to think about the need to get back to the future's past. It might be time to think about going back to the original playbook Jesus gave us: disciples who make disciples who make disciples. This includes the community of the academy, not excluding it. So, this turnaround, we need to talk about a turnaround. I'm not trying to make a play to wreck what you're up to, the beautiful work you do as an educational institution. I'm not trying to wreck your theology. I'm not trying to stuff some Harvard Business School plan into your playbook. And I'm not trying to give you one more thingism for you personally to do or for your school to do, knowing you're very busy already. What I'm trying to say to you is the usual stuff you're using to counter these sorts of threats, it's not going to work. To suggest that we need to turn around might be a death grip on the obvious for some of you, but some of you, you don't realize doom could be around the corner. I want to ask all of you this question. Do your students have the kind of foundation to sustain this scaffold of beautiful higher Christian education that you've offered them? I want to suggest the answer is no, given the trends that we're seeing, and it hits pastoral burnout as well as the individuals out in the pews, the nuns and the duns walking away, the I'm not going to speak, it's not my job to speak. You might be building your scaffold on sandy soil. It may be time to think about remediating that. So let's get back to that one missing thing. Turnarounds thrive on this missing thing we're about to talk about. The one common thing that makes a strategic and a holy difference for what you're up to. Now, the explanation about this is coming, I promise, but I've got another puzzle piece to put on the table. The usual stuff that we tend to always want to keep doing matches this old definition of insanity, right? Attributed to everybody from Benjamin Franklin to Einstein to the author Rita Mae Brown, but there it is, keeping on, keeping on. And that's not a plan. That's a fade to gray play. Turnaround requires a change. It is a obvious issue that the trends and the demands on you today require different than just the good old, same old, same old. And it means we've got to think about going back to the past, back to the future's past, to be able to recoup what Jesus gave us originally. And this all matters not simply for you as an institution, not just the blue rectangle, but for the churches that will inherit the people that you send out into family and community and into society. It matters. You're the fountainhead for tomorrow's disciples, tomorrow's leaders. Different perspective. Wendell Berry, a Christ follower, he's also a farmer, and he happens to also be a professor at Stanford University, said in The Loss of University, article that he wrote, the thing, you get the commoditizing idea there, the thing made by education now is not a fully developed human being. It is a specialist, a careerist, a graduate. Now let's contrast that with another professor who did describe a fully developed human being. Go make disciples, you disciples. That's when you're fully developed. Don't short sell the idea of disciple to simply mean membership in a church or a head full of academics. This is a disciple who makes disciples who makes disciples. That's the kind of disciple that we need, not only for society, but in your classroom so that that scaffold is sustainable. So finally, here we are, that missing thing that hobbles churches and corporations. So are you ready for the word? You promise not to doze off on me. You've had lunch. I don't want to see anybody going for their smartphone or their watch, right? Stick with me here. Because when I say this word, you're going to be tempted to say, I got it. I got to figure it out. Don't do that. Stay with me, okay? That one missing thing that I want to talk about is mission. Not as in mission trip, not as in mission statement, not as in the values that are out on your website. Christ gave the entire church the same mission, the same why. And yet Western Christian culture has lost its why. The why is disciples who make disciples who make disciples. The last demand, command, and mandate by Jesus. That's the why. Okay, look, the deal was the church was going to do the disciples who make disciples, and you were going to teach, right? You were supposed to receive quality infused disciples from churches. They arrive on campus with their why already in hand. Life's good. But the suppliers have been sending you under discipled disciples. Your raw material needs some work. They may crush it in your class, but most folks think 90% of these people who will leave your school, they don't know how to live outdoors as disciples, how to live with other people in society, at work, in the communities. They don't know how to do it. And we're seeing that in these trends emerging from the churches, right? Okay, this is not your fault, but because of who you are as a leader and in higher Christian education, this is your responsibility. Now, yeah, you can go demand the churches get with it and fix all this stuff. Good luck with that as your institutional clock ticks off, right? Get away from the what, though. That's the conversation we need to have now. Let's get to the why. Let's get your Let's get your why in place. And to do that, I want to suggest you might want to get your pitchforks and torches ready to burn me at the stake or to skewer me, because I'm about to probably get you as upset as some of the people I talked to a couple of years back around here. Your mission, your number one, is your why of disciples who make disciples who make disciples. That's who you are. And your academics serve that mission. The mission is superior. All of the academics, your core competency, the beautiful talent and knowledge that you have, it works through the mission. When you do that, when you get the why and you lean to the mission, you, like other organizations that get their why, tend to have this happen to them. People start saying, I want in. I want to be a part of this. Investors start saying, give me some of that action. I want to be a piece of that. I don't want to be with the regular, usual stuff, folks. I want folks that make a big difference. They then find themselves, these organizations that pick up their why, in a unique market position with advantage, sustainable advantage to compete against the other forces and pressures that are against them. You get a viral reputation as a destiny maker when you get your why. Now, why would I say that? No pun intended. Human longing is for the why. None of these are words you haven't heard before, but I just want to touch on them again. Identity, who am I? Meaning, why am I? Purpose, what do I do with my life? Belonging, where is love and community? These are all parts of this idea of human longing. Can you answer these questions for me? The secular schools are trying to do it. How about you? Human longing and your mission go hand in hand. This idea that you own the core answer to such longing. This is something that we look at in the terms of identity as a doulos, a bondservant, a slave to the Most High God. That's who we are. Our life is not our own. Meaning, we are to go make disciples who make disciples. That's the individual's meaning in a purpose that you're helping to equip me with. My vocatio, whether I'm a proctologist or a plumber, you're helping me understand that I'm a doulos who makes disciples in my vocation, in my community, in my society. And that provides belonging, part of a community that changes the world, part of a community that invites the world in, and I'm helping to change that world. I see and understand my significance then as that doulos. Now, this is what we call in the Air Force fighter pilot community the right stuff. Picture from the old movie. In this right stuff, you're providing identity, meaning, purpose, and belonging, and people will run through walls to be part of the right stuff. We had hundreds of applications for every seat that would actually end up as a fighter pilot. You think about politics, people rushing in there to be a part of what they think will bring them identity, meaning, purpose, and belonging. Certainly, this is true in sports, and it's no less true. In fact, it's actually the epitome of the truth when we think about it in the context of the Christian worldview. Dr. Hillman has already told you the Gen A's and the Gen Z's, they're yearning for this. As millennials, I think it tugs on your heart. I know it does for me as a boomer as well. The demise of organizations, though, is preceded time and again by leaders that overlook this right stuff, discounted it as trivial. Your duty is to define the why, the mission, and to live it out. That's who you are. But this loss of meaning is permeating Christian society. Justin Brierley, UK podcaster and author, used to be with Unbelievable. You might have known or heard of that. Wrote in The Guardian recently, my hunch is that a Christian meaning crisis has been brewing in the West for a long time. This is one of the threats that we face. How will we overcome this? Well, people want to go to the usual stuff as their playbook. We take our weaknesses, then we go out against their strengths or against the threats. Our weaknesses against all this stuff. Now, I want to get provocative. Can you prevail in higher Christian education pursuing the usual stuff? I'm going to list some of that in just a minute, but some of you are going to object and say, look, we can't compromise. God is going to use our weaknesses as we pursue him faithfully for his glory. There are examples in the Bible of God telling people to employ their weaknesses. He directed them to employ those weaknesses, But those weaknesses, those examples, are not of God saying, go copy the rest of the world in order to win at what I want. God's ways are not the same way as copying the adversary or the culture's tactics. So, for example, God does throw some pretty strange things. They might look like weaknesses to the rest of the world, pretty strange things out there for us to employ in the pursuit of our why, of our mission. For example, God told Moses, go wave a stick in front of the most formidable army on the face of the earth at that time. He told Joshua to go blow a horn as he marched around the most formidable fortress of its time. He told David to shed his armor and go pick up a sling and a pebble and go sling it at the most heavily armored professional mercenary on the planet at that time, Goliath. These are not exactly firsthand counterpunches that you'd think about for powerful foes. But it sure beats going that way versus the usual stuff, right? We're just going to throw some more programs and talks out there like all the other schools are already doing. We're just going to recruit harder like all the other schools are doing. More tuition discounts like some of the schools are doing and going broke, or more increases like some of the schools are doing and people don't want to pay them. Or we're just going to imitate the Me Too's. Everything they're doing, me too, right? Or we're going to hope the churches, the investors, and the grant dollars hold up. Is that the plan? Do you actually believe that these kind of things will make higher Christian education flourish? The usual stuff loses the why. This is a market example of an organization that lost its why. In 1999, it had a market capitalization. In other words, it was worth on the stock market $524 billion. That's with a B. That made it the 13th largest economy on the planet at that time. Today, dollars, it would be over $1 trillion. It would be in the magnificent seven. It managed over the course of a mission loss, where it redefined into fuzzy nothingness its mission, pursuing other stuff, to lose 90% of its value. It collapsed to $54 billion market cap in less than a decade. It it's the thing that happens all the time. Mission loss is the top of the hit parade in failing organizations. And this kind of drift, this kind of loss, it's given me a wonderful career to come in and help businesses. Who is this? Yeah, GE. A gaggle of other companies have lost their why. Here are some of the names over the years. They lost their why. But this all reinforces our point. If you lose, blur, or forget your mission, you're playing Russian roulette with your strategic future. And in this case, also with the future of churches and society in general. Every turnaround I've been involved with had its root cause, mission loss. They lost their why. So whatever the original mission might have been, nobody knew what it was anymore. Lost in their quotas, PowerPoint briefings, firefighting, urgencies, sticking to the traditions. Things started tipping downward. This isn't a new story, by the way. If you want to just go to 2 Chronicles chapter 34 or 2 Kings 22, read Josiah documenting the story of realizing he's looking at the avalanche of mission loss in the kingdom that no longer knows its why. Great story. Absolutely supports everything we're saying here. So here's another thing that seems to be kind of weird if you think about doing strange stuff in the face of all these ominous threats and trends and issues. The right stuff is go out and make disciples who make disciples who make disciples. Jesus' last directive for every one of us and every organization that we are part of. We serve not with the usual chariots and horses. We're supposed to fight with the right stuff, the why Jesus gave us. Use the tools that you're gifted with for sure, but employ them through the why, not in spite of it. So I want to ask you this, what's in your wallet? Usually it's that mission statement. Do you really believe that your mission statement is the answer to your challenges? Does the mission statement on the website produce the changes in your students around any of the stuff we've talked about today? If your faculty spent 6 months focused exclusively on executing your mission statement, would your organization prosper? Will your students go out and change the world? I tend to doubt it, but it's the usual play. It's the traditional play. Peter Coker at Fort Hays University conducted a study on mission statements, and they concluded this: mission statements largely unknown by employees, yet the employers were unwavering in their beliefs on its unrequited value. Void of your meaning, purpose, identity, and belonging, you're in a fade to gray play. What's in your wallet? Well, maybe the mission statement, but also just how we get along every day. We don't know what our mission is. We're just out doing what we do. We do the stuff that we always do. Charlie Hummel's Tyranny of the Urgent describes this. It will overtake whatever mission you happen to have, the tyranny of the urgent, the firefighting, and it will bury your mission. What people see you doing versus what you say you want to do. And all this is mission diversion. You are an academy, yes, but you're also a trade guild. And you're supposed to be a place where under disciples encounter not only the professors, showing apprentices, disciples who make disciples in the outdoor. You take them, you show them how to work the craft of being a disciple, and then out into the outdoor world so they can get it, so they can get their why. The real mission is disciples who make disciples. That's the why. That's the sure path for sustainable competitive advantage. Taking your charges into a role, into a relationship, into an experience where they can become tradesmen and women in life. Let them see how not only to think about it, but how to practice this stuff outdoors in good and bad times. Something like the medical schools. We get the facts in their brains, but then we take them to bedside. We take them into real life. They can work with it. And it's quite like the model that Christ demonstrated with all of his people. Now, again, pitchforks and torches at the ready. I don't think you are factories. I think, as Plutarch said, minds are not vessels to be filled, but fires to be kindled. Let's go start some fires. Let's start prevailing against these threats using the weapons that we were given by the Lord, not by the tactics of the Me Too. Founded on the fire of mission, you drastically ramp up your odds of taking on the threats because you're a destiny maker, bringing meaning, purpose, identity, belonging alive. The ultimate organizational aim is delivering, replicating, viral, game-changing why for people. Lose the usual stuff. You can't beat Goliath using the trad stuff out there in the marketplace. You need to reach in for your why. Take up your mission. Employ your God-given advantage. Disciples who make disciples who make disciples. Bring meaning, purpose, identity, and belonging alive for your people. God's promise of a world-changing destiny to people who really do hunger to make a difference. Stop looking to the usual stuff for the answers. Get the why, the mission that the boss gave us back aboard. Now, you've themed this conference discipleship here at ABHE. Why does your institution exist? It exists for disciples who make disciples who make disciples. The architecture around that is the beautiful education you provide, but there's your core, there's your why. And when the word gets out, they will storm your doors, investors and students alike. Go make disciples in your academies as your mission, as your why. And remember the words of Darth Vader. It is your destiny.